All right. Consciousness or being hyper conscious is a surefire way of getting rid of any type of joy in your life. Let me just talk about it real quick. When I was in university, I was I could honestly say I was an asshole. In a lack of better words, in university, I was an asshole. I was not really the nicest person. I wasn't really the kindest person. However, I was very hyper realistic. I was very hyper realistic about what I wanted in my life, about what I was going to face in my life, about what was going to be my experience in life. A lot of people might say, oh, that's just a bit too much. You got to do certain things differently. You got to be more bright with it. Case in point, when I was in that time in my life, when I was in university, after university, I was going through a bit of a phase of post graduation depression and everything. And I met a girl who I could honestly say made me feel happy in my life during that time when all the confusion of life was just piling upon me over and over and over. It's just like I got my piece of heaven. And then it turned to shit. It not only turned to shit because of that reason, it turned to shit because my life went to shit because I didn't really have a direction afterwards. Because I was so hyper realistic about what was happening, and I was so hyper conscious about what was happening to the point where I kind of messed myself up when I met this person. And then because the reason why I was so hyper realistic is because I had a very nihilistic perspective of life. There's only a few things we can do. We can only do X, Y, and Z. And when we get to that point, we just have to accept it because that's what I've seen my whole life growing up from when I was a kid into my adulthood, even to this point. I saw that, going back to it, I saw that little piece of heaven. It's kind of like an Avenged Sevenfold song now. I saw that little piece of heaven in my life, and I can honestly say it gave me joy, it gave me comfort, but at the same time, I was going through a lot. I was going through post graduation depression. I had to find a job, ended up working for my dad. There were certain struggles with that as well. We started a business, which automatically failed, which it already failed. This was my first business, and there's a very common rule in entrepreneurship, which is your first business will always fail. Your first business will always fail. And a lot of people, and I've had friends who say, no, it's not true if you meet the right people. Yeah, but then that's not your first business. You're working with someone who has had multiple business experiences before. Or I could meet people who are like hyper educated. Yeah, but it doesn't teach you about the nitty grittiness of business and how much it teaches you and how much it burns you. A lot of people don't acknowledge that. But going back to it, I was going through that certain time in my life where I felt that happiness. And then I got pulled away from it when we decided to, just kind of go our separate ways. We weren't together by any means. What I'm getting at with the reasoning of being hyper realistic is the fact that during that time, hyper realism was a way for me to cope. It was a way for me to find peace and a bit of a semblance in life. And when I got there, when I got that little piece of heaven, it kind of blinded me for a bit. It kind of gave me a bit of hope in my life. But then having to go back to that hyper realism, that shattered my concept of reality because of the fact that I felt that before. I felt that phantasm of a life. I felt that joy in life that to a sense Allah has allowed me to feel, but I knew I was never supposed to feel that way. I was never supposed to grab that emotion and run with it because of the fact that when you live your whole life thinking that something is right, when you get shown that there's a different side of the coin, your identity kind of shifts. And then when you have to go back to what you were before and how you looked at the world before, and that being proven more and more solidified, it does shake you a bit and it does cause you to question whether or not your life was actually supposed to go that way. I've gone through that part of my life, and then I've gone through my whole life. I've gone through my whole life being hyper realistic, also in the form of nihilism, to getting that joy and happiness, and then having to go back to that hyper realism, that hyper consciousness, that hyper realization of what is actually going on in this world. And it will ruin your life, because then there's no more joy in life. There's no more mystery. Then you kind of understand how things are meant to be. You kind of understand how everything is structured, not in like a organization, but you realize a few things that you never thought were there. You start to see the hand of God being played, and how every little aspect has a play in it. You start to question yourself. You truly do. You truly do start to question yourself about what you're doing, where you're going, what's going on with your life, and how it is interconnected in so many things. And you see the advertisements, you see the joy in people's eyes when they go to a theme park, you see the fake smiles on social media, you see the quote unquote happiness that people are going through and what people are experiencing. It no longer fulfills that hunger that you have, because you kind of see it now. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it will ruin you. It will ruin that kind of like sleight of hand mystery about how life is. You kind of see how it goes, you kind of see how it experiences, how you experience it, and then you see how life actually is. You start to unveil everything. You get to see the magician and all his tricks. You see what's happening. You see what's actually going on. You see that. And you have to ask yourself that question. Is it worth it? Is it worth doing it? Are you actually happy doing it? Are you actually happy with where you are? And then you become more and more realistic, because there's no more fantasy behind it. There's no more glitz and glamour behind it. You see the reality about it. Case in point, just look at musicians. I have been a musician for a bit, and I've met a lot of musicians in the industry, and I've been to studios, I've been to meetings, I've been able to meet these people. And I can honestly say, what you see on the music videos, what you see on the interviews, is all fabricated. It's all fantasy. My phone. It's all fantasy. It's not real. What happens behind the veil, what happens behind the scenes, what happens in post-editing or pre-editing, you don't know. You don't know. When that time comes, everything is shattered. Some people want that. Some people just want something else. Some people just want the money. Some people want the fame. And then you ask yourself again, is it worth it? Is it worth it going through it? And then you ask yourself, how did it get this way? Because you become very, very hyper conscious about it. Being extra conscious about things can destroy you. Because then there's no more grandeur. There's no more surprises anymore. You understand? However, there is a but. Understanding that it's not in your control will make you a bit happier. Will make you a bit relieved, actually. I'm a Muslim. I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I believe in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And sometimes I do face challenges, but the only thing that ever gave me the biggest surprise was living my life as a Muslim, having to go through trials and tribulations, having to go through issues, having to go through these problems, quote unquote, you see yourself and you see how life is, and then you see how life changes. And it's all conducted by God. It's all conducted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You get to that point, you'll be surprised. But you are no longer surprised by people. And also, when you are someone who is surprised, you become more conscious. That's why being hyper conscious is also dangerous, because it makes you closer to Allah, which makes you dangerous to people who are against Allah, or who are against the belief, who are against what you believe in. Maybe that's just it. But either way, finding happiness, well, that's a lens for everyone to find. Anyways, it has been Faraz Xify. Take care, stay dangerous, and be well. Assalamualaikum.